The people who say they love you can't always handle the real you. And sometimes the cost of showing up as your true self is losing the people you thought would stay. When I was in middle school, I discovered something that, at the time, felt like magic. If I could make people laugh, they would like me. I wasn't the prettiest, I wasn't the smartest, but I could be funny. I could read a room faster than I could read a book. I could figure out what would make people smile, what would make them feel comfortable, what would make them like me. And so I built this version of myself, a version that always knew the right thing to say, that could keep the mood light, that never let anyone see her cry. I became so good at being what other people needed that I forgot who I was when no one was watching. The truth is, a lot of us do this. Maybe you didn't choose humor. Maybe you chose perfection. Maybe you chose silence. Maybe you chose toughness. Maybe you figured out that being agreeable or being invisible or being overly responsible was the fastest way to be loved, or at least not abandoned. And that's how it starts. We build a mask, not because we're fake, but because somewhere along the way we decided the real us wasn't safe enough to be seen. No one ever teaches us that there's a price to wearing that mask. At first, it feels like it's saving us. People like you, people want to be around you, you get the job, you get the relationship, you get the acceptance. But then, one day, you start to realize something painful. People are loving the mask, not you. They're loving the version of you that always says, "I'm fine." The version that never disagrees. The version that's always easy to be around. And when you go home and take off the mask, you feel completely alone. Because the love you're receiving doesn't feel like it belongs to you, it belongs to the performance. Psychologists call this self-abandonment. It's what happens when we consistently trade our authenticity for attachment. It's the quiet, almost invisible ways we leave ourselves to keep other people close. And at first, it doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like survival. But over time, that survival strategy suffocates the soul. And here's the thing no one tells you. The longer you wear the mask, the harder it is to remember who you were before you put it on. You start asking yourself, do I even know what I want? Do I even know how I feel? Am I really this easygoing, or have I just trained myself to never be a burden? I remember sitting with this one question that shook me. If the people in my life only love the version of me that's always accommodating, always pleasant, always easy to love, do they actually love me at all? Or do they love the mask I wear to be loved? That question changes everything. It's painful, it's disorienting, but it's also the beginning of something honest. Because here's the raw truth. When you shrink yourself to be loved, the love you receive isn't even yours. It's for the mask you wear. And maybe it's time to put the mask down. I remember the exact moment I realized I might be too much for someone. I was sitting across from a person I deeply cared about, someone I thought could hold all of me. I had finally worked up the courage to speak my heart, to tell the truth without dressing it up, without softening it, without trying to make it easier to swallow. I let it all out. The pain, the longing, the fear, the parts of me that didn't know how to be quiet anymore. And as I was speaking, I watched them slowly pull away, not physically, but emotionally. Their bodies stiffened, their eyes darted around the room as if they were searching for an exit. They didn't say anything cruel. They didn't need to. I could feel it. I was too much. There's something unspeakably painful about realizing that your full self is more than someone else can handle. It feels like rejection, but deeper. It feels like your truth is somehow heavy, Like your honesty has weight, and instead of someone leaning in to carry it with you, they quietly set it down and walk away. I think so many of us are afraid of this moment. That if we stop filtering ourselves, if we stop managing other people's comfort, if we show up fully, our big feelings, our unpolished stories, our deep needs, that people will run. So what do? We start trimming parts of ourselves away. We edit our stories. We choose silence over honesty. We decide that maybe if we just show a little less, we'll be easier to love. But what no one tells us is that every time we shrink ourselves to fit someone else's capacity, we are slowly disappearing. We are choosing acceptance over authenticity, and we start to live in a terrifying question. If I have to be less of myself to keep you, am I actually keeping you at all? Here's the thing, when you offer someone the edited version of you, you never feel fully loved even when they stay. Because deep down, there's this ache that whispers, you don't actually know me. You love the version of me I've allowed you to see. And if you really saw me, would you still be here? That fear is what keeps us stuck. That fear convinces us to keep performing, to keep managing, to keep being agreeable. And that's not a life. It's a long audition for love you'll never truly feel. There's a psychological reason this happens. Our nervous system is wired for connection. We are biologically driven to avoid rejection because, at our core, we fear that losing connection means losing safety. So when someone pulls away from our vulnerability, our body experiences it as danger. That's why we so often retreat, why we make ourselves smaller. It's not just emotional, but survival isn't the same as living. Performing isn't the same as belonging. Being tolerated isn't the same as being loved. And this is the tender, brutal truth. Sometimes you will be too much for people. Sometimes your feelings will scare them. Sometimes your honesty will confront things they're not ready to face. Sometimes your depth will overwhelm them because they haven't yet built the capacity to meet you there. And that's not your fault. And it's not your burden to carry. Being too much for the wrong person doesn't make you too much. It simply means they were not your person. The right people will not be allergic to your depth. The right people won't ask you to shrink. The right people will look at the parts of you that feel heavy and say, let me sit with you there. But you can only find those people if you first decide to stop shrinking. You have to risk being too much to finally find the people who can hold all of you. And here's what I've learned. The people who truly see you, the people who can handle your honesty, your sadness, your wild joy, your messy truth, they will never, ever make you feel like you are too much. They will make you feel like you are finally enough. There's a betrayal we talk about often. The kind where someone lies to us, cheats us, walks away when we needed them to stay. But there's another betrayal, a quieter one. The kind that isn't loud or obvious is the betrayal that happens when we keep abandoning ourselves for the sake of keeping other people close. I've lived that betrayal more times than I can count. There was a season in my life when I was stuck in a friendship that looked perfect on the outside. We took photos together, showed up for each other's birthdays, laughed at the same jokes. But inside, I was shrinking. I would swallow my feelings to keep the peace. I would nod when I wanted to say no. I would laugh at things that actually broke my heart. Every time something didn't sit right with me, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Every time I felt dismissed or overlooked, I convinced myself I was just being sensitive. The truth is, I stayed because I was more afraid of losing the friendship than I was of losing myself. And that's the part we don't like to say out loud. Sometimes we betray ourselves, not because we're weak, but because we're terrified. We're terrified that if we start speaking up, if we start telling the truth, if we start drawing boundaries, the people we love won't stay. And so we stay silent, we stay agreeable, we stay small. We do everything we can to keep the relationship intact, even if it's slowly breaking us in the process. But here's what no one tells you. Every time you silence your voice to keep someone else, you are choosing them over you. You are saying, your comfort matters more than my truth, and that is the slowest form of self-destruction. There's a reason we fall into this pattern. Psychologists talk about something called fawning, a trauma response, where we people-please our way to safety. It's when we believe that if we can just be likable enough, agreeable enough, quiet enough, we'll stay safe. It's an old survival strategy, often rooted in childhood, when love felt conditional and we learned that our needs were too much, our feelings were inconvenient, our voices were dangerous. So we adapt. We learn to keep the peace at any cost. We learn to tolerate what feels wrong. We learn to overfunction, to overgive, to over-apologize. But the cost is steep, because one day you wake up and realize you've been so busy holding on to other people that you've let go of yourself. And that's when the heartbreak really sinks in, not because they left, but because you did. You left yourself so many times in the name of being loved. You betrayed your own boundaries. You silenced your own voice. You made yourself a stranger in your own life just to keep someone else comfortable. That betrayal, the one we do to ourselves, it lingers. It stings in the quiet moments when no one's watching. It's the ache in your chest when you're surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. It's the exhaustion of pretending to be fine when you know you're not. The people around me didn't betray me. I did. I was the one who taught them it was okay to walk over my boundaries. I was the one who never asked for more. I was the one who kept abandoning myself just to avoid the pain of disappointing them. And I've learned something brutal and beautiful. When you start honoring your own voice, some people will leave. Some relationships will break. Some rooms will feel less welcoming. But that is the price of self-loyalty. And the truth is, the cost of abandoning yourself is always higher than the cost of being abandoned by others. You lose your sense of home. And finding your way back is a long, painful journey. So here's the raw truth. The greatest betrayal is not when others walk away from us. It's when we walk away from ourselves. And maybe it's time to come back home. There's this moment, this gut-wrenching, soul-stretching moment, when you realize you have to choose. You can either keep performing to stay loved, or you can finally show up as your whole self, even if it means risking the loss of the people you thought you couldn't live without. I remember standing right there, at that crossroads, knowing that whichever path I chose, something would break. And what terrified me the most was that it might be me. For so long, I chose to perform. I thought I had to. I thought that's what love required, that I would need to be pleasant, easy, convenient, small. I would bend and fold myself into shapes that didn't even look like me anymore, just to keep certain people close. I thought if I could just stay agreeable enough, if I could stay silent in all the right places, then I could hold on to them. Because I believed the lie so many of us believe, that love is earned by staying likable. But there comes a day when your soul just gets too loud, when you can't pretend anymore, when the silence starts to choke you, when the things you've swallowed for years start rising to the surface and you can't push them back down. And I hit that day. I hit that day hard. I finally chose me. I chose to tell the truth. I chose to say no. I chose to stop apologizing for my own needs. I chose to stop laughing at things that hurt me. I chose to stop shrinking. And I lost them. They didn't slam the door. There wasn't some big fight. They just faded. They stopped showing up in the ways they used to. And in the empty space they left behind, I realized something. The version of me they loved no longer existed. That's the grief we don't talk about. The grief that comes when you finally start living in your truth and realize some people only knew how to love your performance, not your person. We talk so much about courage, like it's this loud, public thing, like jumping off cliffs and taking big risks. But sometimes courage is quiet. Sometimes courage is sitting in your living room, realizing you could lose people by being who you really are and choosing you anyway. The hard truth is, some people will only stay with the version of you that makes them comfortable. And the second you outgrow that version, they'll leave. Not because you're wrong or broken, but because you no longer fit the role they cast you in. Psychologically, this is deeply connected to our attachment system. We are wired to seek safety through connection. Our nervous system panics when we sense relational loss, even if that relationship was harming us. That's why it feels physically painful when people start pulling away. That's why we grieve, even when we know they weren't good for us. Our bodies interpret disconnection as danger, even when our hearts know we are finally choosing freedom. But here's where the real courage comes in. Trusting that the right people will not ask you to perform. Trusting that losing what isn't real is the first step toward building what is. Trusting that the people who can meet you in your wholeness will only find you when you stop hiding behind fragments of yourself. It's terrifying. It's lonely at first. There will be nights where you wonder if you made a mistake, where you scroll through old messages, where you miss the comfort of fitting in, even though it cost you yourself. There will be moments you will ache for the life you had when you were smaller. But I promise you, that ache is not a sign to go back. It's the growing pain of stepping into your own life. Because here's the thing no one tells you. Authenticity does not guarantee belonging with everyone, but it guarantees belonging to yourself. And you can survive the loss of almost anything, but you cannot survive the loss of your own soul. You choose your truth over their comfort. When you choose self-respect over performance. When you choose your voice over your silence. You might lose them, yes, but you will finally find you. And that is a trade worth making. Every single time. There is something we all crave so deeply that sometimes we don't even have words for it. We want to be seen. Fully, completely. Not the curated version, not the highlight reel, not the I'm fine version we offer the world. We want someone to look at us in our mess, in our fear, in our complicated truth, and say, I see you, and I'm not going anywhere. But here's the brutal thing. Being seen is terrifying. The first time I allowed someone to truly see me, I was sure it would scare them away. I had spent years carefully managing how I showed up in relationships, offering just enough to be loved, but never enough to be truly known. I kept conversations safe. I avoided saying the hard things. I only cried behind closed doors. I thought if I could just stay polished, if I could stay agreeable, then people would keep loving me. But I was so lonely. Because even when people said they loved me, I didn't believe them. Not really. How could I? They didn't actually know me. They knew the version of me I had carefully packaged for them. They loved the girl who always said, "No worries, I'm good," not the one who was falling apart on the inside. There came a point where I couldn't keep carrying that mask anymore. It wasn't just heavy. It was suffocating me. So I made the choice to let someone see the parts of me I had always hidden. The sadness, the anxiety, the shame, the parts I thought were too messy to be loved. I still remember the silence that followed. I braced for the rejection. I braced for the withdrawal. I braced for the look that says, "Oh, you're not who I thought you were." But instead, they leaned in. They didn't fix me. They didn't rush to make it pretty, and they just sat there and said, "I see you, and I love you there." And that cracked me wide open. The kind of love that changes us isn't the love that only shows up when we're easy to love. It's the love that stays when we're messy, when we're angry, when we're scared, when we're raw. It's the love that doesn't flinch when we're finally honest. It's the love that holds space, not because we're perfect, but because we're real. But here's where it gets complicated. A lot of us aren't even giving people the chance to love us like that, because we're so busy performing. We've built these walls, these carefully constructed identities, these masks we wear because we're terrified of what would happen if someone saw the whole picture. And honestly, we have reason to be afraid. Vulnerability is not a guarantee. Some people will leave. Some people will mishandle your truth. Some people simply don't have the capacity to love in the places where you need to be loved. That's why this is so hard, because stepping into full visibility is a risk. It's not safe. It's not comfortable. It's choosing to say, "Here I am, all of me, and if you leave, I will survive it. But I can't keep hiding anymore." Psychologists will tell you that emotional intimacy, the thing we all long for, is impossible without vulnerability. You can't have true connection if you're editing yourself out of the relationship. And so many people are living in relationships that feel empty, not because love isn't possible, but because neither person is showing up fully. You can't feel loved in a relationship where you're not actually present. You can't feel seen when you refuse to be visible. You can't experience belonging if you're constantly self-abandoning to keep the peace. The deepest hunger we have is to belong, to be accepted exactly as we are, with nothing held back. And yet we're starving ourselves of that nourishment because we're terrified to step out from behind the mask. But here's the thing, if you have to perform to be loved, you will always feel lonely. Even in a crowded room, you can have people all around you, people who say they love you, people who text you, people who show up, and still feel painfully alone because the version of you they're loving is not the real you. But when you are loved as you are, messy, complicated, unfinished, you'll finally feel at home. Not just with them, with yourself. That's what real love feels like. It feels like exhaling. It feels like coming home. It feels like I don't have to hold my breath here. I don't have to perform here. I don't have to disappear to be worthy here. And maybe that's the most radical kind of courage. To let yourself be seen. To say, "Here I am, all of me, take me or leave me." And to know that if they leave, you'll still have you. Because when you love yourself enough to be fully seen, you'll never settle for love that only knows half of you. Again, vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bravest way to live. It's the decision to stop begging for scraps of love and start sitting at the table of your own worth. Some people will leave when you step into your authenticity. Let them. That's how you make room for the ones who can stay. The real you is worth showing up for.